Jennifer, you're stuck?
I was stuck.
Okay, we're not stuck now.
I'm not. I mean, the music was going and everything, and I'm like, it's not counting down for me.
Wow.
So that's how it goes when you're on a live stream. So welcome to the live stream of Podcast Editor Mastermind, everyone. This is the business podcast for the podcast editor. The podcast editors who have a podcast about podcast editing business who don't edit their own podcast. Thanks, Alejandro.
Wow.
That's us.
If you're joining us live, we'd love to have your thoughts and questions and comments in the chat. So let StreamYard know who you are so we can know who you are and say hello. Patrick, Steve, Mike, thanks for all being here already. And we have a special guest tonight that we'll be introducing in a moment. But first off, I'm Jennifer Longworth of Bourbon Barrel Podcasting. You can find me anywhere at Bourbon Barrel Podcasting. And below me is...
I'm Daniel Abendroth. You can find me at Roth Media. Don't bother looking at social medias because you'll be disappointed.
And I'm Brian Ensminger. You can find me at Top Tier Audio, although you might be disappointed if you go there too. So we'll just follow that up. Jennifer, who's our guest? Get me off the mic.
Oh, no. Okay, today we have Darrell Darnell, the one, the only, the legend, Pro Podcast Solutions. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, Pro Podcast Solutions is where you can find me online. I don't know if that's dangerous or not, but it's awesome to be with you. Thanks for having me.
So the reason I asked you on is kind of selfish. It's because I know you've been running a very successful team for quite a while. And I just started a team like within the last 2 months after fighting it for 6 years. So it's like, all right, who can we talk to? Who can we bring on who would provide value to Jennifer and the listening audience? And you, of course, came to mind. So tell us your story. Tell us about Pro Podcast Solutions, how you got into this, and what you
Well, sure. So I got into podcasting as a listener in 2006. I was a just obsessive fan about the TV show Lost. And I was on some chat forums one day, and somebody mentioned that they were listening to some podcasts about Lost. And I was like, what's a podcast? I'm going to go check that out. So I subscribed to like every Lost podcast I could. And Lost introduced me to J.J. Abrams. So when he launched his next TV show, which was called Fringe, I started a podcast about that. Because I'm so clever, it was called the Fringe Podcast, and that we had, a nice bit of success with that podcast, but it really ignited the podcast bug at a whole new level. And at the time, I was working at a kind of a regional chain of bookstores as the e-commerce director, and my passion for that started to wane, and my passion for podcasting continued to grow. And so I left that job in 2013. To go into full-time doing podcast production, in large part through a connection with Cliff Ravenscraft, who had connected me with a guy who was starting a podcast network about really short-form TV show podcasts. So my podcasts, like Fringe, those suckers are like an hour and a half, 2 hours long.
Mm-hmm.
These podcasts were like 10, maybe 15 minutes long. And they were looking for hosts initially, which I was happy to do. But I was like, Stuart, I think maybe you need someone to edit all these shows. And he's like, as a matter of fact, I do. And so I threw my hat in the ring, and I got that. And so it was a good enough gig where I was able to quit the corporate job 6 months later. So on May 4th is my entrepreneurial birthday. It just happens to be, that was like my first full-time entrepreneur day was May 4th, or is May 4th. So I get to celebrate that day in a couple of fun, geeky ways. So anyway, that was 2013. In 2014, I formed Pro Podcast Solutions. For the first year, I was trying to do everything under my podcast network branding, which is Golden Spiral Media. So that's where I podcast about all things geeky and sci-fi and stuff like that. And then finally, one day, a lady named Linda came to me, and she said, I'm looking for an editor who's doing this full time. I'm looking for someone who's serious about this. And I just go to your website, I just see a bunch of sci-fi stuff, and there's like one page that says you edit podcasts for other people. And I was like, oh, this is how I provide for my family. I've got, 2 young kids, and, this is how we put food on the table. I'm very serious about it. And fortunately, she did become a client. We worked together for several years until she retired her podcast. But it showed me the importance of having my own dedicated website that just focused on what I do for other people. So that's when I started Pro Podcast Solutions. And that was a huge turning point. The business really took off after that point. So anyway, that was 2014, and that's how Pro Podcast Solutions came to be.
So did you teach yourself editing? Do you have audio background anywhere in there, or?
I have no audio background other than running the board at church, which even
Yeah.
that was like self-taught not even self-taught, like on a Saturday afternoon, or probably on a Sunday morning, come in an hour early. We'll show you how to run the board. And so
Right.
that's how my knowledge of audio production of any kind came to be. And then my background in podcast editing is just editing my own podcast. I remember the first podcast episode we recorded for the Fringe podcast, and it was like, 2 hours long, and it took me all weekend to edit it. And I thought, what, I'm on a Windows computer, and I hear people talk about GarageBand for their podcast, so I need to get a Mac and switch to GarageBand. So I bought a MacBook and got GarageBand, and I'm like, I had been using Audacity prior to, and I was like, man, GarageBand is terrible. This is
It's
horrific. But it got me into the Mac ecosystem, which I quite like. But I ditched GarageBand, went back to Audacity for the Mac, and it was just all self-taught. Just I finally got to where I could edit an episode more quickly than an entire weekend. So I'm a little faster now, but it's all self-taught.
So we're coming up on the 1 year or the anniversary then of your podcast editor's birthday, right?
That's right. That's right.
You said you celebrate a couple of geeky reasons. What's the other one?
Well, it's Star Wars Day, of course.
May the
May the 4th.
4th,
Yeah. So usually we'll go out to dinner at my favorite restaurant, which is a Mexican restaurant here in town called Ted's, and we'll celebrate, Star Wars Day, but really it's celebrating my entrepreneurial birthday.
Awesome.
So this is going to be your 10-year anniversary?
11 year, because 2013 is
okay.
when I left the job. 2014 is when I started PPS. So, we usually celebrate the day I left the other job.
Gotcha. That's quite a feat.
So, what point did you realize that you didn't want to be a one-man show anymore?
Well, honestly, that was my goal from the very beginning. So when I worked at the bookstore, I started in college as a part-time cashier, and then once I got to college, I was like, oh shoot, I don't want to. I was a graphic artist major, and pretty quickly I decided this isn't what I thought it was, because I went to a very tiny high school that had no art classes. My first art class was in college, and it was completely different than what I expected it to be. So I dropped out of college and pursued the bookstore full time and worked my way up through the ranks there. And so I had experience managing groups of people from, say, 6 to 10 when I was at corporate, all the way up to 30, 40 when I was running my own store. So I was comfortable managing people from the inception of the idea of this company. So I always was thinking about that in the background, like how can I structure this in such a way that it will grow beyond me, and I've got a team of people that are kind of doing this together.
Very cool. And unlike me, who said I'm not going to hire anybody ever until I did.
And that's the thing, but that's okay. Like so you can go about it. There's no right or wrong way to do this line of work that we're in. Like if you're a solo person and you only want to be the only person in your business because of any number of reasons, that's completely okay. Because to do what I do is a different skill set. I just said I don't have a background in or trained background, a formal background in audio editing. I do have lots of training and background in managing people. But that managing people and all that comes with that is a completely different thing that a lot of people don't want to have any part of, or it freaks them out or whatever. Or maybe they did that and they're done with that. So there's no, if you choose to go it solo, there's nothing wrong with that.
So Steve is chiming in. He says he's about to bring on a new contractor specifically to do video editing. And this will be the first contractor he brings on who he didn't train. So it's kind of scary.
Yeah, so that makes me think, right? Bringing somebody on, and this was my experience as well, because I brought in on a couple of contractors for a little while, and there can be a certain amount of fear in giving the reins over to somebody and saying, my name's going to go on this, but I'm going to pay you to do that. Like, how did you know that you were finding the right people to do the work for you?
Yeah, it's very scary. And this is your baby, your brand, not
Yeah.
theirs, you know. So it's very scary. For me, it's very much the hiring process. So I do a few things when I go through the hiring process. We're talking about an editor here. So for one, they have to be on Adobe Audition. That's a deal breaker for us. And the reason for that is every client, for a couple of reasons, but every client starts with what we call our lead audio editor, Mike. And so every client starts with Mike. And then as Mike's plate fills up, he comes to me and says, hey, I'm ready to hand off these clients to our other team. And so he just zips up his Adobe template files and sends them over to the new editor. The new editor unzips those, opens it up, and everything's ready to go. And if we were on different DAWs, then that just wouldn't work. So,
Right.
Or someone's sick or on vacation, same principle. Someone leaves, we need to replace them with a new editor, same principle. So everyone has to be on Adobe Audition. If they're not, because I have a form they fill out on my website. And so when I need to hire someone, I just pull up that folder that those all go into, and I start looking through those. But they don't even make it into that folder if they don't have Adobe Audition. So that's the first thing. But the other thing is that when I'm talking to them, I'm trying to get an idea first, most of their heart. What type of person are they? What type of character do they have? What's their demeanor? And then we also look at their skill set. Obviously, that's important too. So I have a project that I know is particularly challenging in a couple of different ways. It's got some edits that are hard to clean up, but it also has one or two spots in there that show me what you're thinking about when you're editing. For example, the guest, when the host, so the host says, Jennifer, it's great to have you on the show today. And Jennifer says, thank you. I'm glad to have you on my show. I mean, and then they kind of get into, so it was just a little brain fart moment. And so I'm listening to see, did they fix that or did they leave it in? It's a little bit cleaner than what I just described. Like there's no there or filler word, but it makes the guest look a little bit like a doofus, and so you want to clean that out and make the guest look better. Did they catch that or did they miss that? And so this project has some different challenges. Some of them are more philosophical in nature, like that one. Some of them are definitely testing your skill set. And then I always pick it apart. I nitpick it, and I send it back to them, and I just give them a list of timestamps of all the things that they messed up. And some of them, like I said, they're nitpicky. And the reason I do that is I want to see what their response is to criticism and how are they going to handle that? And what words do they choose to respond to me when I'm picking apart their work? Something that they were obviously very particular with and careful with, and all that stuff. And so again, I'm trying to hire for their mindset, their heart, their character, and their skill set. And so if I can find the right person, which is difficult, but it pays off in the end. So if you do the work to do that stuff up front, then you've got the right person for your team. And that has just always proved itself to be the case. Not that I think there's been one bad hire, but it's been a really good process for me.
One thing that you mentioned just kind of stood out to me around being hard to find the right person. Do you have like a general sense of what percentage of people that make it to the interview process actually make it through the interview process to being part of the team?
I would say making it to the interview process is the more difficult process to make it through. So I might have 50 people that I start out with, and I might narrow that down to 10, and then I might interview 3 of them. And then sometimes it's hard to choose between the 3 because I only have one spot open. But of the three, maybe all three are qualified. Usually at least one of them is. So it's a pretty good screening process to get down before the interview process starts.
So Steve asks, how much of your decision is made on raw skills versus how well they present themselves during the interview process?
It's 100% of both. It really is. If they fail one, then they're not qualified. They need to pass both equally. I'm not saying they have to be perfect at each, because none of us are. But if they're a great editor, but their demeanor and attitude was bad. Honestly, I've had it before where the interview process, just their demeanor was so not what I'm looking for. I didn't even give them the test. I just thanked them for their time, and that was the end of it. So they've got to have both.
Wow.
So how do you advertise, or how do you get the word out that you are looking for people, and how do you get people to apply?
I just have a link on my website, join our team. And then it's happened before where I've gone through that folder where all the applicants go, and I still am not finding what I'm looking for. So at that point, I'll go to Steve and I'll say, hey, can I post something in the podcast editors group on Facebook? And he's always gracious enough to allow me to do that. So I'll post something there if I'm still haven't found what I'm looking for.
Nice. I know when I was looking, I posted in my Reaper for Podcasting Facebook group, and that way kind of really narrowed it down to the people who actually use Reaper specifically for podcasting.
We got another comment. This is from Mike, Two Guys Talking Podcast Network. I currently have a 5-person team / Academy of Editors. I love the heart comment, but I eventually had to add in a legal element to avoid ongoing poaching activity. Any thoughts there?
I have not had to add that, but I think I'm lucky. I don't know. I can't give you any example as to why I've been lucky there. I mentioned Mike earlier. So Mike has been with me 6 or 8 years, been quite a while. And I'm not as close with them now, but just because I don't see them at events anymore. But the guys from Podfly and I were fairly close there for a while. We would hang out, and when we go to podcast conferences, we'd usually have a meal together and just chat. And, we were kind of frenemies, that sort of thing. And I remember Corey from Podfly emailing me one day, and he says, hey, we got an applicant that we really liked. We'd like to hire, but he tells us he's currently working for you. His name's Mike. He's looking to add, he needs to, he was working for me part-time. And so he needed some additional income. And Mike I was at a tipping point with Mike where my business was growing, and I was just about to offer him an incentive to just work with PPS and be that head editor role that I mentioned earlier. And I said, would you please not? And that was nice of Corey to come to me and ask me ahead of time. That was what do you call it? A professional courtesy, I suppose, which I really appreciated. And he didn't. And I was able to offer Mike, something more substantial. And so it worked out for me. That's the only poaching type of situation I have faced. And so I don't have any good advice of why that's the case. That's just been my experience for some reason.
How about
Danielle
from
and Brian, y'all are posting questions in our private chat. Go ahead. Whoever wants to go.
I think we were talking there about poaching talent. Maybe do you have anything in your agreement with your editors about not poaching clients?
Oh, that no. I don't have that either. And I should. Again, I have not been bitten there. It's because I look so hard at that character thing before I hire somebody. But that has not been an issue either. It's a good practice to have. I should, and probably because I haven't had it, I've just take it for granted and haven't put that language in there. But I don't have it.
Patrick's got a question. He says, what's the process for describing or instructing how detailed or not your editors work?
Well, we have two services or two levels of editing that we offer. One we call standard editing, one we call pro editing. And so I have a kind of an itemized, bulleted description of what each of those services include for our editors. When they go through that test example, they do the pro level. That's the more difficult level of editing. If they can do a pro edit clean, they can certainly do a standard edit clean. So I have just a description of what each one of them includes so that they've got that information from the get-go.
So I kind of want to take a step back because I had a question pop up. Like when you're getting started, you said that you were planning from the get-go to have more of an agency model and have people under you. Is that right?
That's right.
When you're thinking about that, like what did you do differently to make sure that you were like prepared for that versus somebody who's like just getting started and having to like transition? So I guess like from the get-go, like what did you do to like make sure that you were set up to be able to easily bring on employees?
Yep. Two things, and they're both super important. One is systems, and the other is communication. And communication covers a lot of different things. But how are you going to communicate with clients? How are you going to communicate with team members? And more importantly, what are you going to communicate to them in regards to standards? So I mentioned the sheets that I've put together so that they know what comes in a standard edit, what comes in a pro edit. Every new client we put together after we've kind of got them ironed out and smoothed out, we put together an SOP so that if someone fills in for the team or we have a changeover in staff, they can pull that SOP and try to make it as seamless of a transition as possible or seamless of a fill-in as possible. So those are really important. So trying to think of what documentation I would need to have in order to properly train my staff, and what systems would I need to have in place so that communication and files and all that data that goes back and forth with the team would work smoothly. And those systems change over time. That's just the nature of what Dropbox and Google spreadsheets worked for a while, and then they didn't. And so what was the next step? And so we moved into things like Asana, and then we ran into trouble with that. So we moved to Basecamp, and now we're about to outgrow Basecamp. And so we're actually in the process of developing our own custom built backend software for all of our client file sharing, communication, and all that stuff that we're building from the ground up. So, but I didn't need that day one. I thought I did. I have a software development background. I did eventually go back to college and got a degree in computer programming and built a lot of WordPress stuff. And so I thought from day one, let me build this whole back-end system for all this. And it turned out I didn't need all that. It was too much. It was really taking me away from the essentials. And so now we're at a spot 10 years later where we're needing that stuff. But look at just the simplest systems that you can use to be effective. And at first that was email and Google spreadsheets and Dropbox, and that worked great until it didn't. And then we just kept, taking it the next best step for us. But those are the things you've got to have: communication and systems. Without communications and systems, you can't possibly scale. And a team just compounds that.
Does your team work communicate directly with the clients, or do you have like a filter kind of funnel or anything?
Nope, they all have direct access to the clients through Basecamp.
Awesome.
So Jesse is chiming in with a question. How do you handle the various state laws surrounding contractors versus employees? Do you have employees, contractors? What are you doing?
Everybody's a contractor. The only employees of our company are me and my wife. So that's good enough to get us, the insurance that we need and stuff like that. But everyone else is a contractor. Most of them are in the States, so I do 1099s. Those that are international don't have to worry about that. But I don't worry about state to state laws. That's just, maybe that's because the employees are here in my state. So I'm not sure if that's an issue otherwise.
Yeah, I'll say that's something that gives me pause. I was working with contractors before. I've had to scale back over the last year or so, but that's always something where I'm going, what if I have somebody in the wrong state and the ABC language in their state is different, and all of a sudden I discover that I've had an employee for a couple of years and now I've got to do some kind of make good on that. Currently not an issue for me because I don't have any, but that was always my fear too.
Yeah, and I lean into my tax advisor and my CPA for that. At Podcasting with this last year, I did a panel with Steve Stewart and a couple of other folks, but Steve asked us at the very end, what is it we outsource? And I had a hard time understanding his question. I was like, what do you mean? What do I outsource? And he explains, like, don't you outsource your taxes? I'm like, oh, yes, I do outsource my taxes. And so stuff like that, I lean heavily on my CPA, it's a whole firm. It makes it sound bigger than it is, but it's not just one. Like, I started out with just one person. She does taxes for people, and now I'm with, it's a small business here in Oklahoma City where I live, and they have a team of, I don't know, 10 or 12 on their team. But I lean on them for stuff like that. I'm not an expert on that.
Did you say that all your contractors are in your state?
Not in my state, but in the
Oh,
U.S. Most of them are in the
okay.
U.S. Yeah.
I thought you said, okay.
Yeah, sorry if I didn't make that clear.
So Mike wants to know, what kind of volume are you currently handling, and how do you handle spot checking content generated by your team?
Okay. So currently we're at about 150 clients, I think. It's been a little while since I ran that number. I don't have a great system for keeping that easily accessible, but it's around 150. And spot checking is, we don't have a system for that. I've tried different things over the years with some success. We've got a super good team, but things do get out sometimes that, man, I wish they didn't get out, but it's super rare. We had a really bad January where 3 episodes got out that we had to fix. And that was probably the same number of mistakes as we had all of last year, which is a lot of content that we put out. So we've got a great team that just puts out great episodes week after week. But when there's something like that, we have a chat. What happened? Well, what do we need to do to make sure that didn't happen again? So, but I don't have a formal system for spot checking things.
That is impressive. That kind of like high quality, no mistake kind of thing. Like that's really something.
It's the team. They're great.
Yeah. Kind of goes back to like your interview and kind of hiring process and make sure you really get the person you're looking for.
Okay, guys, what else do you have over here?
I was trying to say, I thought there's another question in the
Daniel
comments.
had a question that was related to scaling, I think.
Yeah. So Brian touched on this, and I'm kind of going through it as well, to where like I've had to scale back my contractors just because I've had several clients take a break or reduce what they're putting out, and so I've just had to scale back. So like, have you ever had to deal with that, and like, what's your process for that?
I haven't necessarily had to do that. I mean, we've seen that decrease as well. It's concerning. I mean, we were over 200 clients at one point. Now I told you we're somewhere between 100 and 125 or 150. So that's a significant decrease in the number of clients that we've seen as well. No one's on salary at our company. They're all just on a client by client basis. None of us, we all hurt when we lose clients, but I think we've all kind of accepted that's the way it is, as sucky as that is sometimes. I've had people leave maybe because they weren't getting what they had hoped, or they've got a better opportunity somewhere else, and I don't fault them for that one single bit. There was one time early on in late 2014, in fact, that I was going to have to, I had one person I had hired, and I was going to have to let him go because there was just no way I could pay him. And I think I was about 1 or 2 weeks away from having that conversation with him because I was paying him out of my savings account, and my savings account was about to run dry. And he came to me and said, "Hey, I need to move on. I'm going to do this other thing." And I was just like, "Oh, thank God."
Well, If that's
Yeah.
what's best for you, then I guess I can.
Oh, I'm so sorry. No.
Yeah, shucks.
That problem kind of worked itself out. So I haven't had to deal with that much.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, as a like fixed expenses just scare the snot out of me, right? Knowing that I might have somebody that I've committed to, that's been one of the big. Well, that's the reason I started with contractors, is because I was super scared of doing that. I can totally feel that for you.
Absolutely, and that's why I structured it the way that I did. I mean, everybody's contract labor there, and the way that we build clients and pay our team is not the way most people do it. And I don't know that I would advise, if I could go back 10 years, I might do it differently. Because as I scaled, it did not scale. And so the way we build clients is by the number of episodes that we did for them during a calendar month. And so this first week of April, so we just finished our billing cycle for the work we did in March. And so I never know from month to month what my revenue is going to be. It's largely close, but it could vary. Certainly, it's not consistent each month. And team members are paid accordingly. So they bill me at the beginning of April for the work that they did in March. And so the cash flow is compensatory. It's clients are billed after the fact, and team members bill me after the fact. And so it works well that way. But a lot of folks have a package that they sign people up for, and you get billed that regardless of how many episodes you do. You're reserving my time on my schedule, and I get all that, those arguments and stuff. And that's why I said maybe I would do it differently, because that would certainly help me and know consistently what my cash flow is going to be from month to month, and be able to predict that in a better way. But they do mirror each other pretty well. So there's not usually, it can get pretty tight, especially if people aren't paying their invoices at any given time. The amount of money that clients owe me is ridiculous. And sometimes it gets frustrating. And so but the new portal that we're building is going to take care of that. So that's something that we've found a solution for. It still bills them per episode, but it does it in a way that's much better. And so, it's a challenge for sure. And, but the team, that's what they sign up for. That's the way that they agree to be compensated when they come on. And so it's part of our structure.
Patrick wants to know if you've had anybody with you the whole 11 years.
No, I did. I hired my first. So a guy named Brian was my first hire that I just mentioned that he quit. So I hired him in like August of 2013, and he left in like November or December of 2013. And then in, I want to say like February, March, April of 2014, I hired Karen, and she's still with me. So.
Oh, okay. So almost.
Yep.
Wow.
And I noticed on your website you don't just have editors. You have other service providers too, correct?
That's right. Our team consists of, our primary team consists of project managers, editors, and writers. Those are the team members that are interacting with clients on an episode-to-episode basis. So editor and writer, probably pretty self-explanatory. The project manager is the main point person for a client. So when a client comes on board, if we're launching them, they work with our launch specialist. And then once they get into production, we introduce them to their project manager. And their project manager oversees all of the day-to-day or week-to-week ins and outs of their podcast. When they get new content from the client, the project manager receives that, confirms it, gets it set up in the system. When those assets are completed on our end, they go back to the project manager so they can get them over to the client, and then ultimately the project manager publishes them. So that project manager is a very important role for our team. That's what Karen is, for example.
That's really cool.
So with that team, do you manage everyone directly? Do you delegate some of that management? How does that work from a structural standpoint?
I manage everyone directly. Karen is kind of our lead project manager. That just means that when other project managers have a question, they can go to her first. She's been with us the longest. She knows everything for the most part. and she's most likely going to be able to answer their question. And they're in the throes of it every day. And so there are things that they know. Like I met with a prospect today, and we were talking about the various media hosts that are out there, and they asked me about Art 19, and I'm like, I personally have not worked with them, but I have team members who have, and that's what I mean. Like they know things that I don't. And so so Mike is our lead editor, Karen is our lead project manager, but I'm involved with every person at a personal level too. So they can come to me at any time. I go to them. So but they're also welcome to go to that respective lead that they have.
Cool. Thanks.
I think we had a question from Mike about the scale and vital importance of communication. They use Asana instances as a thundercloud for ideas and discussion. And what are you using?
Asana instances as a thundercloud for ideas discussion.
I was hoping this made sense to somebody here, except not. I don't fully understand.
I don't know what they mean by thundercloud.
I think maybe just a
I would think
repository.
like brainstorming.
Maybe so.
Maybe.
Mike,
Yeah.
you can always give us some more detail in the comments.
We get it
Yeah.
completely wrong.
I'll say that we use Basecamp for our central hub for things, as I mentioned earlier, and so client communication happens there. We also use Slack for internal communication. So we've got our own Slack channels. We've got a channel for writers. We've got a channel for editors. We've got a channel for project managers. We've got a channel for the full team. We've got that random channel so we can have fun, all that stuff. We can bring in, conversations to if we've got something going on with a client, let's bring in the editor, the writer, the project manager, and have a private discussion, all that stuff that Slack allows you to do. So we're using Slack for team communication and Basecamp for client communication. Does that answer the question? I'm still not sure what thundercloud means in that context.
So he has a follow-up.
I think that's a different question, though.
Oh,
It's a
okay,
different
okay.
question. It's a different question, but we'll go ahead. What kind of, not sure what else to call it, but penalty chain do you have in place? I.e., first mistake, this happens, second mistake, that happens, etc.
Yeah. It depends. Going back to my corporate days and working at a store where I was supervising, 30 people on average, sometimes higher, but my attitude has always been people show up to work every day with a desire to do a good job, to do their best. And none of us are perfect. And so that's never going to happen every single day. So when a mistake happens, what's the heart of what happened? Was it because of negligence? Was it because of carelessness? Was it because you had too many things assigned to you? This happened recently. Was it because your mom was in the hospital? So we really looked at what the root of what happened. I don't have a scorecard where we're like, I'm sorry, Luke, this is your third mistake in January. Sorry, I just called out Luke. Sorry, Luke. It wasn't Luke. It was no.
Luke listening to this being like, what?
In the odds that Luke is listening, I'm very, very sorry to just called you out like that. But no, I mean, okay, so it was Luke that had 3 mistakes in January. And so, but we looked at each of those individually and what happened on each of those. And so, 3's a lot for anyone. And I mentioned we had 3 mistakes in January. I didn't tell you they were the same person, but they were. And it's like, Luke's one of my best editors. Like when I had a very challenging client that I worked with for years that I handed off to Luke, and Luke has done a great job with. So I know that Luke is very capable. So what's going on here? And we talked about what was going on, what was the cause of each of those mistakes. And so I just take that approach to it. If I had someone, I told you I had a bad hire one time, and that was because there was a person that I hired and they were really skilled, but there was a mistake made, and their attitude about the mistake was really not what I needed to receive in that situation. And I don't mean I needed to receive it in any type of egotistical way. I mean in the way that we need to handle that situation for the sake of our team and the sake of our client. And so their response to the mistake was such that they weren't with us much longer after that. No, I think it was a week. And so, but we're looking at the root of the reason and what their response is when a mistake happens, more than a, hey, this is your third demerit this year or month or whatever it is.
I really like that because it's similar to kind of how I approach it when with my contractors. It's like I assume that there is an honest mistake, and I try to like approach it because like my initial reaction is like, how could they have let this happen? Like, why did they do this? My frustration. But then like when I bring it up to them, I try to switch. But like, what did I do like as the leader
That's
to
right.
not prevent that? And so like I try to approach like, hey, what happened here? What can we do to prevent it in the future? Or like, is there something I can do to like support you to like make sure that you're able to do whatever it is?
And that's a great way to look at it, because ultimately it should be, as a leader, you looking at yourself and your systems and other things to find out what could, like, we lost one of our biggest clients last year. It hurt bad. We didn't lose her because of poor work or negligence. We lost her because she was looking to expand her services. I was working on some of those things behind the scenes and I hadn't told my team. So she came to her project manager and was asked about some things. And the project manager needed to communicate better. And we talked about how that could be done differently in the future. But I hadn't told the project managers, hey, these are some things we're working on. I was just completely silent and leaving them out of that communication loop. So I was definitely at fault for that as well. We both owned some of that mistake to lose that client. And so you should always be looking at yourself to find out what you could do differently to better position your team for success.
Yeah. I know like one thing that I try to switch up is like having more clear, concise expectations as opposed to like, here's what I want you to do. And then just kind of like letting them figure it out as opposed to like, here's like the reasons why, here's like the outcome, like just kind of like giving them more of like my thought process behind it as opposed to just like throw them to the wolves and expecting them to know exactly what I want without telling them what I want.
So Patrick says, have AI developments changed your company? Are you excited about this? Are you scared, or has it not made any impact at all?
I'm sure it's made an impact, particularly on the writing side of things. We've seen, some clients. I can think of like 3 clients that we've lost writing to over the last 6 to 8 months, and I don't know if the AI played a role in that or not. With AI, even with the writing, it still needs a human to intervene.
Oh yeah.
So, clients who have hired us to do writing, if they're going to take that back, I mean, I sure hope they're not just going straight up AI because it's not great. But it's definitely an issue. On the editing side of things, there's Descript that does some things, and I'm kind of a fan of Adobe's podcast AI tool. It does amazing things. It speeds up my workflow a lot of times. It seems like the dirtier the audio is, the better it does. The cleaner the audio, it doesn't do so great, which is great for me. So if I get dirty audio, I usually upload it to Adobe and see, use that little percentage slider to see, to find that sweet spot. Because it goes too hard, it sounds robotic, and so you have to be really careful with that. But we try to leverage AI to help us in our workflows, to help us offer new services that we couldn't offer to clients before, or offer them in a better way. So I think we've lost some clients to it, but I think we've benefited from it just as much as that, if not more.
Yeah, I was talking to Steve and talking to my wife a little bit about it, just like how cringy and like really bad, like some of the titles that AI comes up with, or like some of the copywriting. It's just like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely needs a fair bit of a human touch in there, but it's a great starting point.
Yep.
Yeah, AI and So, comment from Mike: AI is and will continue to be a primer for the skill sets that we all have. Everyone gets the little internal red flags, but we'll be just fine.
I think there's that, but there is also the element that Darrell touched on, where we as professionals that know what we're doing, there are ways that we can use AI to speed up our workflow to deliver things we couldn't do before. We're not taking the human out necessarily. We're using a new tool. I think that AI by itself will probably always, well, for the future that I can foresee, play at the bottom of the market if you're not wanting a some kind of human intervention. But I use AI tools to help me with EQ and compression. Not that I don't go back and tweak it, right? But I get that first pass of just let's fix the resonances in like 15 seconds, where before I'd have to do the magic. And now I can just go, this is the shape I think I would like. It's very helpful.
Yep.
Yeah, I go back to, I often think about when we had Jesse on the show and he made a comment. It's like, we're not going to lose out to AI. We're going to lose out to people who know how to use AI in their business. And it's like the key is like being on the forefront of using AI to boost what you're already doing and kind of give you a leg up.
Mike says he started generating a portfolio enhancement that showcases the peril of AI in editing. I'll share that out to the group when it's set.
Yeah, that'd be great. So Jennifer, we started this because you're expanding your team. We've gotten a lot of comments from the chat, and that's great. Like, we're super happy you're here and asking, but we also want to make sure if Jennifer has any lingering questions, she gets to ask them.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm like just trying to take it all in, because right now I am just using Dropbox and a Google Sheet and email, and then one of my editors we Facebook Messenger all the time, and I know her in real life, and I saw her the other day, so that's kind of nice. She's my key editor right now if I'm like going to think about these things. And I guess I'm doing more project management based on I'm the one downloading the files and uploading the files and getting the files, so there's no direct client to contractor communication yet.
Yeah.
That's probably something that's going to end up having to happen, or
Here's the way I look at it. What is it that, like there's a great book, The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. And he talks about your zone of genius. Like, what are those things that you really hate doing? What are those things? And he takes a different approach. He uses different vocabulary, I should say, but this is the way I internalized it. Like, what are those things that I'm not good at? I'm not skilled at. Like, I look and I'm the bottleneck. I'm the problem. Okay. Or that I hate doing, like invoicing, and so I'll do about 7 or 8 clients a month. The rest are all done by one of our other team members on the invoicing side. And so, but if you like that project management side of things, that those touch points and those tasks that go along with that, you don't have to follow the model that I did.
right.
So the other analogy I use is like the 5 love languages. And I use this with clients too. Like when they're trying to decide what to outsource or what to keep internally, I say, what fills your love tank when you're thinking about all the things that are part of your podcast, generating content ideas, recording the episodes, editing the episodes, creating the show notes, doing the social media stuff, all the stuff that goes along with, and all those things and more, guest booking, you name it, whatever. What is it that you love doing, interacting with your audience, whatever? What's just filling your heart and rejuvenating that passion for your podcast or your business or whatever it is? Do those things. Spend your time on those things. And whatever those things you're like, this sucks, I hate this, or whatever, then outsource those things. And so that works at a client level, that works at a team member level, that works at a you level, Jennifer. And so always be thinking about what is it that sucks your energy, and what is it that where you're the bottleneck? Because maybe you like doing it, but maybe your business has grown to the point where you're the bottleneck. And so that's another challenge that you've got to make a solution for. But those are the ways I approach it. I love editing, but I realized a while ago that doesn't give me the time and energy and stuff that I need to work in the business to grow the business. And so I only edit one client now, and that scaled. It was 20 clients, and then it was 10 clients, and then it was 8 clients for a long time, and then it was 5, whatever. So just always be thinking about what your role is going to look like when, and whatever that next milestone marker is for you, so you can be prepared for that.
And I also want to kind of like comment on, because you said something about needing to kind of open up who's communicating with their clients. One thing, like my policy has always been like, my contractors don't talk to the clients. It's just like me and my assistant. The main reason for me was I didn't want my client to have to figure out who they need to reach out. If they have a question, like which one of like the 4 people on the team do I reach out to? That way they know it's like either me or my assistant, and then we'll figure out like where the question needs to go and kind of get it solved. That way there's not just like a whole bunch of communication going on. It's kind of like filter it down so it's easier on the client.
All right. Well, it's that time of the show where we used to get out the Poddex question, but we used up all the Poddex questions, and now it's our powered by AI portion of the show, where we go to ChatGPT and I type in "Ask me a random question."
So get ready to have your drink. I've got my bottle of water right here.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that's our ChatGPT drinking game, and here it is. If you could have any superpower, but it came with a strange and unexpected side effect, what power would you choose, and what side effect would you be willing to deal with? And this sounds like a great one for Darrell, because you've got all your little superhero pop figures and everything. So any superpower, but it comes with a strange, unexpected side effect. What do you think?
Oh, my.
Wow.
I think I would take the power to wield the Force. And the side effect would be I had to speak in Limerick.
It's like Yoda, but just a little bit different.
Oh, just a little different, yeah.
Wow.
I don't know. Like, Batman's my favorite, in case you can't tell, and he doesn't really have any superpowers, which is one of the reasons I like him so much. But
Right.
I would love to be able to teleport places and just bypass airports and train stations and sitting in traffic and just teleport places. What would I be willing to like deal with for that? I mean, I guess, if that's a time saver, then it's got the opposite of that is a time suck. So maybe like it zaps all of my energy for 24 hours. Like I can't, like I have to go immediately to bed for 24 hours or something like that. So I'd be willing to trade that off. Like, go to Podcast Movement. Boom, I'm there, but I'm like stuck in my hotel room for 24 hours. No problem. Just come in a day earlier.
Yeah.
It's all good.
That's a good one.
I would say
gotta-
go ahead.
I'm popping up Mike's comment. Watches Brian say, "These aren't the you're looking for."
But as a Limerick, I can't do that on the fly. Sorry. Maybe I should have said haiku.
For me, like the power to fly, but maybe like I can no longer run, or like I have a weird walk, like a
You
wobbly
can
my
fly,
walk.
but you can't.
But I can't walk well.
Like an albatross.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then Patrick says the power to not be fat and crippled, and the side effect is that I'm pizza deficient.
Oh.
And I always like to think of invisibility as my favorite superpower, and I'm like, what if you cast a shadow?
Oh, tricky.
Yeah.
That'd be scary to see the shadow run across the street.
I don't know if I'd want to deal with it, but it's like that's the only thing I can. I'm like, oh, invisibility, but But what if you got stuck with the shadow?
So before we go, Mike did have one comment that I wanted to hit because
Yeah,
we were
go for it.
talking about things that you might be giving up. And he just mentioned that this key editor might also be, or should also be able to talk to you and share that you might be the reason that you're having problems, right? So having that feedback loop and being open to that, I think that's a very key piece as well.
Yep.
Now I'm going to shut up again.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Darrell. Again, where can people find you? What's the best way to keep up with you if they want
Well,
to
the
pick your
website
brain or
is
learn more?
propodcastsolutions.com. I am Darrell, Mardarrell on X and Facebook. I'm not really active there. I don't care that much for social media. I don't have a social media account for Pro Podcast. I mean, I have a Facebook page, but that was just so nobody else would take it. We're not really active there. So, but the website's propodcastsolutions.com.
All right. And I'm Jennifer Longworth. You can find me at bourbonbarrelpodcasting.com. Below me is...
I'm Daniel Abendroth. You can find me at rothmedia.audio.
I'm Brian Ensminger. I wield the Force and I speak in Limerick, and you can find me at toptieraudio.com if you ever want to hear from me again.
And not appearing is Carrie, and she is at carrie.land. And we thank all of the folks in the comments for joining us. Shout out to Alejandra, who will be editing this. And we hope to see you all in a couple weeks. Thank you. And, oh, wait, I forgot. Daniel, if someone wants to be a guest, what do they do?
Just go to podcasteditorsmastermind.com/be a guest, fill out the form, and someone will be in touch with you.
All right, and now I get to hit the big red button, right, Brian?
Yes. Good luck.
All right, thanks.